The North American Society for the Psychology of Sport and Physical Activity, NASPSPA, will celebrate its 50th anniversary in June of 2017. As part of the celebrations, it was decided that we would interview the previous distinguished scholars. My name is Penny McCullough, and today I will be chatting with Dr. Jane Clark. Through 2016, NASPSPA has named 24 distinguished scholars. Dr. Clark was named a distinguished scholar in 2013. This interview is being conducted in April of 2017. Good afternoon, Dr. Clark. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to talk with you.
Great. So let's start off. Dr. Clark, please tell us a little bit about your academic background.
So I'm a first-generation college graduate. My family told me I had a choice between being a teacher and a nurse. I chose being a teacher, and then I decided on what was I best at. And at that time, I always thought I was best at my physical education classes. So I decided to be a health and physical education teacher. So I went to SUNY Brockport, which is a state university system college in New York, just outside Rochester, and graduated with a teaching degree in health and physical education. But somewhere along the line in my junior and senior year, a couple of my professors suggested that I might want to think about doing graduate work. And after I went student teaching, I decided that maybe I should go and learn a little bit more about how it is that people learn motor skills, because I was having trouble. I thought if I just told you how to do something, you could do it. And of course, you discover pretty quickly that not everybody can do what you're asking them to do. So I went off to do my master's degree at the University of Washington in Seattle. After 2 years of there as a teaching assistant, I landed a job at Purdue University as an instructor. I wasn't really quite sure to be a PhD, but I thought so. But I took the time off to be an instructor in a very good department at Purdue University. And then I was in the Big Ten, and the Big Ten had quite a long history of having PhD programs and then what we call physical education. And it wasn't long, 3 years later, and I went off to do my PhD at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, where I was there for 3 years. So that's my...
What fine institutions?
Say that again?
What fine institutions you attended?
What fine institutions I did. And we both laugh at that because we both have the same pedigree, same institution.
So tell us a little bit more about what made you to decide to pursue a doctoral degree, and how did you decide which university you would go to, and then tell us a little bit about your mentor there.
Well, I think because I wanted to be a teacher, there are a lot of people who are studying teaching, and one of my friends once said, I studied teaching as opposed to learning, and I was just appalled at that comment. But I really wanted to emphasize learning, and in particular, I wanted to study the learning of children, the learning of motor skills in children. So in our field, we've generally called that motor development or motor skill development. And so my interest had always been in trying to help people learn motor skills. And when I was at Purdue University, I was in a very fine institution, a good department, and they really strongly said you need to go off and get your PhD and do research in the field. And but one of the things that really solidified my interest in little children was they had what we would call today a swim and gym program, but was then called the Developmental Movement Education Program. And I taught swimming to preschoolers, and I just thought this was wonderful. It sort of kept me sane every day. But I also realized that if I really wanted to make a difference in the field, I was going to have to get a PhD and actually, sort of get some evidence behind the kinds of things we were doing. So why did I pick Wisconsin? Well, as I just said a minute ago, there's a sort of Big Ten mentality that once you're in the Big Ten, these are the schools that you should think about. And there were not a lot of schools that were really good schools for doctoral work in what then we call physical education. And Wisconsin had a great program. And one of the reasons I ended up going to Wisconsin was that I actually got a fellowship to go there, which meant that I wasn't going to have to be a teaching assistant or a research assistant for at least 2 years. And that was because my mentor, Lois Halverson, had I'd gone up to meet with her and talk with her about a program, and she was very encouraging and said, we're going to try to get you a fellowship, which sort of nailed the coffin, as it were, to sort of, wow, of course I'll come if you'll give me a fellowship. But again, I say for young people, one of the things I did was I went there and talked with her, basically interviewed the department about whether this was a good place. Okay.
And then, yeah, that's great. And now tell us a little bit, think back, what do you recall as your first exposure, interest, or involvement in research?
When I was an undergraduate student, it was the 60s, and what we now call kinesiology didn't exist, except that then it was actually called the biomechanics class was called kinesiology. And I wasn't very satisfied with the classes I had. I really wanted to study things a little bit more. So one of my professors suggested I do a 3-credit independent study in which I really looked at the literature on motor learning. So I basically I wouldn't call it a research, but you would call it sort of a book research on motor learning. Then my first experience in doing research was my master's thesis at the University of Washington. And I love to tell the story there because what I did was I was trying, and remember I came from a teaching background, so I'm thinking, okay, what is a better way to teach? I was teaching tennis, so there was a method that was going around called teaching people to teach with a short racket rather than the long racket. So I did my master's thesis on one way of teaching versus another. And what I learned then was that is not a good design. I really learned that this was not how to do research. I'm always appalled when I still continue to see that kind of research going on. It didn't take me too long to figure out that this was not the way this should be done. So my first experience was, I actually did my analysis of variance by hand on a Monroe calculator using a square root book on logs, doing logs. So my real experience was it didn't kill me off to do my analysis of variance 2 by 2 by hand on a Monroe calculator, and that's a this is not there's no square root key on any calculator in those days. That's how old I am. Not as good as Frankie Cumby, who did hers all vector analysis on a Monroe calculator, but so my first experience was sort of eye-opening, and then after that, of course, my research was when I was doing my doctoral work. And actually, as Penny, you remember, I was actually in George Stelmach's lab one summer where we collected data on pre-selected movement and motor memory studies. And that was my first experience in collecting data on adults. And then my real first research study was my dissertation, which I collected data on children. So
okay, great. So tell us a little bit more. Yeah.
Did I lose you, Penny? Hello? Hello?